There's nothing to snitch on. We're innocent.
New footage just dropped, and it's shaking the entire rap game to its core. For years, people thought they had YNW Bortlen's loyalty all figured out. He was the ride or die, the one person who swore he'd never turn on YNW Melly. Back in 2023, he even went live telling the world he'd never fold, no matter what. But what surfaced in court just days ago paints a chillingly different picture. The camera caught the face of a man who didn't look fearless anymore. He looked trapped, pressured, and ready to break under the weight of it all. That's not the energy of a man standing firm. That's the look of someone cornered with no way out.
If you wake up tomorrow and decide you changed your mind and you want to resolve this case, both cases, by way of a jury trial, that's not going to happen. If you want to accept the deal, you can accept the deal today.
Now whispers across social media are exploding into full-on claims. Some are saying this can only mean one thing, that Bortlen is finally considering flipping. The viral clip making the rounds allegedly shows him begging Melly to spare him, pleading like the loyalty he once swore by has turned into pure survival mode. This isn't a just gossip, it as a bombshell revelation that flips the YNW saga on its head.
I'm going to go one at a time. In case number 19-1871 CF10A, right now, you're charged as follows. Counts 1 and 2 is murder in the first degree with a firearm. Those are capital felonies, which means it's a mandatory life sentence.
It makes everyone question not only loyalty and fear, but what really happened in that car the night two of their closest friends lost their lives. From day one, prosecutors painted Bortlen as the getaway driver who didn't just sit back, but actively helped cover up a brutal double murder.
Okay. So, Mr. Henry, the state is telling me that they're extending an offer to you, and the offer is as follows. In case number 19-1871 CF10A, they're going to null pros or drop counts 1 and 2, both first-degree murder charges.
They claimed he spun up a fake drive-by story at the ER to protect Melly, and that narrative has been their weapon from the very beginning. So when that begging for his life clip surfaced, the internet went into full meltdown. Was Bortlen truly Melly's brother in arms? Or was he about to become the next casualty in this deadly saga? Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. The judge rattled off charge after charge, and it sounded less like a trial and more like the reading of a death sentence for a man's future.
Sir, do you understand all the pending charges and the maximum possible penalties involved?
Murder in the first degree, mandatory life. Accessory after the fact, 30 years. Tampering tied to a capital felony, life. Directing a criminal gang, life. Conspiracy, life. Even unlawful use of a two-way device.
Your answers have no bearing on me and have no bearing on this negotiated resolution. The deal you've negotiated is the deal you've negotiated.
The list was so heavy that people in the gallery whispered it felt like watching a funeral for Bortlen's freedom. And then came the shocking twist. The state played its hand.
If he takes this plea, number one, he definitely has to testify against Melly.
They dangled an offer that could flip the entire case, drop the double murder counts in exchange for Bortlen pleading out to lesser charges. A 16-year deal suddenly sat on the table. Think about that. 16 years versus drowning in life sentences stacked like dominoes. That's not just a plea deal. That's a lifeline. And the kind of cold business decision that would tempt even the most loyal man when survival is the only thing left on the board.
This is a death penalty case. He's a death penalty defendant. It's his decision.
Members of the state attorney's office have committed obstruction of justice and attempted witness tampering.
But what Bortlen ultimately agreed to wasn't the 16-year deal everyone thought he might take. It was something far more explosive for the narrative. In a separate proceeding, he pled no contest to accessory after the fact, along with select counts in the newer case. The outcome? 10 years locked up plus 6 years of probation. On paper, it looked like he dodged a bullet, and to some, it looked like loyalty still intact. But here's the twist that set the streets on fire. There was a catch.
ROR since she's not in custody, but she's going to have to sign up for pretrial. They're going to have to verify her address, and then they're going to put her on an electronic monitor. That's the only restriction.
The deal included what's called a proffer. In plain English, that means sitting down and offering up information the state believes could matter later. The judge even spelled it out in court. The deal would stand regardless, but a proffer sit-down would still happen. That tiny detail is what flipped perception upside down and sent the internet into chaos. Commentary lit up across platforms. DJ Academics told his audience straight up, deals like this usually mean one thing, testifying later.
The time that he would spend would probably be like 8 years in jail. And then he'd be free.
Suddenly, the streets were divided. Was Bortlen still holding it down, or was he setting the stage to flip when called upon? He tried to shut down that narrative himself, publicly insisting he wasn't cooperating. But then came the kicker, the alleged "let me live" footage hitting the timeline.
You have the right to maintain your plea of not guilty and have a trial in each case. You were giving up all of those rights. The matter is going to be resolved today, right now, this afternoon. Is that?
That clip didn't just add drama. It added a whole new layer of motive. Was Bortlen's voice shaking out of legal desperation, or was it pure, raw fear that Melly might see him as the next target? And if fear really is in play, prosecutors could twist it into a devastating weapon, using it to argue there is a clear pattern of intimidation circling Melly's retrial.
And you mentioned that there were some individuals inside. And when you approached the vehicle, was it apparent their condition?
Yes, they weren't moving.
Remember, that courtroom is already a circus on fire. Melly's own attorney, Raven Liberty, is being investigated for alleged witness tampering, while the defense is firing back accusing the state of misconduct tied to a lead detective and possible Brady violations. That's not just messy, it's chaos spilling out in real time. And then there's the witness side drama that feels like its own Netflix series. Melly's ex, Mariah Hamilton, has been dragged through the legal mud, warrants flying, material witness battles erupting, and a judge caught in the middle trying to thread the needle. Despite defense objections, she was ultimately roped into court with monitoring, turning her personal life into courtroom ammunition. Now zoom back in on that viral Bortlen footage, him allegedly begging for his life.
Recalled that the witnesses under subpoena, the members of the state attorney's office have committed obstruction of justice and attempted witness tampering.
If prosecutors tie that clip to the timeline of events, like the infamous studio drop-off and the shifting stories that followed, they'll argue it's not just a coincidence. It feeds directly into their broader theory. Melly pulled the trigger, and Bortlen cleaned up the mess, not out of loyalty, but out of sheer terror. That framing plays perfectly to juror emotion, fear, survival, coercion, all the things that rip apart the idea of unshakable brotherhood. Instead of a loyal soldier, Bortlen comes off as a man trapped in Melly's shadow, and the optics are brutal. The so-called brotherhood of YNW doesn't just look fractured, it looks shattered on camera for the whole world to see. One man stares down the needle's shadow, another takes a deal, and two are already in the ground. That's the grim math of this entire YNW tragedy. If this "let me live" clip ends up authenticated and played in front of a jury, it won't just bruise the defense, it could completely destroy it.
There's nothing to snitch on. We're innocent.
Think about it. This isn't just shaky loyalty. This is evidence that could be used as the nail in the coffin for Melly's case. And here's why it matters so much. Florida prosecutors understand the power of narrative better than anyone. They don't just want jurors to see stacks of paperwork or technical legal arguments. They want them to feel something. They want jurors to feel fear in their gut, to look at Melly not as a young artist, but as a man capable of making even his closest brother beg for mercy.
Of course, with a proffer, it's an offer of proof, an offer of information or evidence and things of that nature that will ultimately come into play with a prosecution, assumingly YNW Melly's prosecution in this case. And so, as far as I'm understanding it to be, is that through this proffer agreement, of course, the prosecution wants him to cooperate, but there's no negative sanction for him if he does not.
If that becomes the image burned into their minds, then the haunting question follows. If Bortlen himself begged to live, what chance did Sakchaser and Juvy ever really have? That's why this viral clip, even before being officially verified, is sparking outrage and dividing the internet. It feeds directly into the state's hands, amplifying their case theory like gasoline on an already raging fire. Whether it's legal strategy, survival instinct, or betrayal, one thing is certain. The brotherhood that once defined YNW is collapsing under the weight of its own secrets, and the world is watching every second of it. Bortlen's story now sits on a razor's edge. On one side, people swear he stayed solid, never officially turning on Melly. But on the other, his signature is on paperwork that bought him 10 years instead of a lifetime, and prosecutors don't just hand out those kinds of deals as acts of charity. So what's the truth here? Is he a survivor who bent the system just enough to escape the shadow of death row, or a man who finally bent under pressure and gave the state exactly what it wanted all along?
If you wake up tomorrow or the next day and you decide you changed your mind and you want to resolve this case, both cases, by way of a jury trial, that's not going to happen. If you want to have a trial, the trial starts tomorrow. If you want to accept the deal, you can accept the deal today. But there's not going to be any buyer's remorse. In other words.
Even the judge's words in court added fuel to the fire. The way the deal was framed didn't sound like victory. It sounded like surrender. That wasn't the language of a man standing tall on his loyalty. It was the language of a man cornered, stripped of options, and forced to choose survival over every bond he ever swore to keep.
Someone described it just kind of getting punched twice in the head. And then the next thing, he's asking this deputy to lie for him.
And that's exactly why the "Let Me Live" clip carries such devastating symbolic weight. It isn't just a dramatic soundbite. It's a haunting metaphor. Symbolic of that night in 2018 when Bortlen allegedly watched two of his closest friends die. And symbolic of every year since, trapped in courtrooms where he has been forced to choose between brotherhood and breathing free air outside a prison cell.
It's 2 counts of accessory after the fact, tampering with a witness, and a capital felon. I'm going to sentence you to 10 years in Florida State Prison.
Now contrast that with Melly's position. He hasn't bent. He hasn't taken deals. He's facing the death penalty head-on, with a strategy built on casting doubt. Doubt on prosecutors, doubt on detectives, even doubt on his own defense team now under investigation.
Ducked down in the driver's seat, he was driving, to avoid being hit.
So picture this. A jury watching a clip of his last remaining ally, the man who once swore loyalty, literally begging Melly to let him live. That image alone could outweigh every defense argument and shatter the foundation of brotherhood that YNW built its name on. That clip doesn't just shake the case. It destroys the very foundation of doubt the defense has been trying to build. It paints Melly not as a troubled young artist caught in a tangled story, but as a predator, a figure so intimidating that even his closest ally allegedly begged for his life. And you can bet prosecutors are salivating at the thought. They've already gone to war over admissibility of evidence, allegations of misconduct, and endless fights about witness credibility. If they manage to get this clip in front of a jury, that could be game over. But the backdrop makes the whole thing even wilder. Melly's ex, Mariah Hamilton, has been dragged in and out of court as a material witness, fighting warrants, battling electronic monitoring, and having her private life ripped open for the world to see. Detectives themselves are being accused of lying on search warrants, while his attorney, Raven Liberty, is under investigation of her own for alleged witness tampering. It's courtroom chaos stacked on top of chaos, and then right in the middle of it all drops the footage of Bortlen allegedly begging for mercy. This isn't just a piece of evidence, it's a weapon. It's ammunition that could decide the entire war, and the internet knows it. Fans of Melly's scream setup, swearing Bortlen's deal proves nothing, and the clip is taken out of context. But critics argue the opposite, that this is the final nail, proof that Bortlen was always a pawn in Melly's deadly game. And the most chilling twist? With a proffer in play, prosecutors might not even need Bortlen to flip outright. Just the perception that he could is enough to poison a jury's view forever. Here is the chilling part. Prosecutors don't even need Bortlen to take the stand for the damage to land. They can weaponize his own words, his own alleged pleas, and spin them into a story that makes jurors feel the fear. That grainy clip becomes the emotional bridge tying every single legal argument together, giving their case not just evidence, but raw emotion. So where does that leave us as Part 1 closes? The so-called brotherhood of YNW lies shattered in pieces. 2 men are dead, 1 man is sentenced but still breathing, and another stares down a retrial with the death penalty looming like a guillotine. And at the very center sits a viral clip, shaky, raw, and unforgettable, allegedly capturing YNW Bortlen begging YNW Melly to spare his life. And here's the question haunting everyone. Was that desperate plea whispered back in 2018 in the bloody aftermath of 2 murders? Or was it whispered in 2025 when the deal hit the table and survival became his only option? Either way, the meaning is brutal. It tells the same chilling story. Bortlen wanted out, and Melly held the power of life and death in his hands. Stay tuned, because in part 2, we're breaking it all down. What exactly was said in that alleged footage, how it matches up with known calls and timelines, and how prosecutors could stitch it directly into the proffer and plea trail, piece by piece, until Melly's entire defense crumbles in front of the jury. The fear wrapped around that clip, the alleged moment where YNW Bortlen pleads for his life, has taken on an almost mythical status in the rap world. People aren't just watching it casually, they're dissecting it frame by frame, slowing down the audio, analyzing every flicker of expression like it's the Zapruder film. That's what makes this bombshell so deadly. If the footage is authentic, it adds a new dimension to the case that no stack of paperwork or legal motion ever could. Because what it shows is bigger than evidence. It shows fear. It shows hierarchy. It shows that when Melly stepped into a room, he didn't just command respect. He controlled the very air everyone breathed. That aura of dominance makes the clip more than just scandal. It makes it symbolic of the entire YNW story. Now pause for a second, because this isn't the first time prosecutors have claimed they had a smoking gun in this case. From day one, they argued Bortlen drove the bodies of Sakchaser and Juvy to the hospital and spun a fake drive-by to cover it all up. They rolled out cell phone records, ballistics reports, and even officer testimony describing bullet holes everywhere. Yet somehow, Bortlen walked away untouched. But here's the catch. Evidence alone didn't close the deal. In the first trial, the jury deadlocked, and Melly escaped with a mistrial. That's why this new footage feels like such a game changer. It isn't just evidence, it's emotion. And prosecutors know emotion can seal a case faster than hard science ever could. Jurors don't only convict on cold facts, they convict on stories. And this viral clip tells a devastating one, a story of dominance, submission, and one man holding another man's life in his hands for the world to see. Think about the timing here. It's almost too perfect. This alleged begging for his life moment lines up eerily with the crushing pressure Bortlen was facing in court. Remember, the judge rattled off charge after charge, stacking multiple life sentences on his shoulders like bricks. And then, in the same breath, prosecutors slid a lifeline across the table, dropped the double murder counts, plead to accessory and tampering, and served 10 years instead. That sharp turn from death to a decade, to the defense, it reeks of cooperation. And that's where the danger lies. It's a ticking time bomb, because if prosecutors manage to connect the dots, they'll argue something devastating. This man feared Melly so much that he not only begged for his life, but also grabbed at the only deal that could save him. Suddenly, the courtroom paperwork has a human face, tied directly to a viral clip dripping with fear. That's a narrative jurors can't ignore. Here's how prosecutors could weaponize it step by step. First, they reframe Bortlen, not as a loyal soldier covering for a friend, but as a hostage trapped in Melly's orbit. They argue he drove the bodies, not out of loyalty, but because he was too terrified to do anything else. Second, they link it straight to his plea deal. They'll claim he didn't flip because he wanted to betray Melly. He flipped because survival demanded it. That framing strips away the brotherhood myth and paints the YNW empire as nothing more than fear, coercion, and submission under one man's shadow. Bortlen flipped because he knew the alternative wasn't freedom. It was death. Death either at Melly's hands or death behind bars serving back-to-back life sentences. And that's exactly how prosecutors will spin it. Third, They all weave it into their broader narrative. Melly as a master manipulator who exerts control over everyone in his orbit, from co-defendants to girlfriends, even to his own attorneys. Just look at the Mariah Hamilton saga. She was yanked into court as a material witness and slapped with electronic monitoring like she was the one on trial. Prosecutors made their position crystal clear. Anyone who gets too close to Melly either ends up dead, silenced, or trapped under the system's thumb. That's the drumbeat they'll hammer into jurors' ears. Melly equals control, and control equals guilt. But the defense isn't rolling over. They've been screaming from rooftops about prosecutorial misconduct. Their argument is simple, but dangerous for the state. Detectives lied, evidence was hidden, and witnesses were coached into giving stories that fit a narrative. If the defense can convince jurors that this "let me live" footage is out of context, or worse, a manipulation designed to smear Melly, then the entire clip could lose its devastating power. That asks the battlefield right now, one side framing the footage as raw proof of fear and submission, the other painting it as just another dirty trick in a case already marred by hidden evidence, manipulated warrants, and shady tactics. The fight isn't just over facts, it's over who owns the story. Here's the real problem, the one prosecutors are banking on. Jurors don't forget visuals. They don't forget the trembling sound of a man pleading for his life. Paperwork can be explained away. A detective's credibility can be shredded on cross. But fear, raw fear, cannot be unheard. And that's exactly why this part of the saga is so crucial. It's the moment where perception collides with reality, both in the courtroom and on the streets. Think about it. Bortlen is screaming in the clip, but in the courtroom, the judge is locking him into a guilty adjudication on accessory and tampering. At the same time, on social media, the viral footage shows him allegedly begging for his life. That's three different realities crashing together: paperwork, courtroom verdict, and raw emotion. And jurors will be asked to decide which version they believe is the truth. And here's where it gets even darker. Legal commentators are already pointing out that prosecutors may not even need Bortlen to take the stand. With that proffer agreement in place, the state can argue he already provided valuable information behind closed doors. They don't need him front and center. They just need the optics. That's the killer move. Prosecutors can stand in front of the jury holding up the plea deal in one hand and the viral clip in the other, telling them these are two sides of the same coin. Together, they prove the same damning narrative. Bortlen wanted out. Melly held the power, and fear, not loyalty, has always been the glue holding this case together. YNW Bortlen knew deep down that siding with Melly was nothing short of a death sentence. And if you think that reality won't sway a jury, then you haven't been paying attention to how prosecutors operate in high-profile rap cases. They don't need absolute truth. They need a narrative that sticks, a story so powerful it drowns out doubt. And right now, that story is dripping with fear, betrayal, and survival. So what does this mean for Melly? It means his defense team is walking straight into a buzzsaw. They won't just be battling physical evidence like cell phone records and ballistics, or fighting off accusations of witness intimidation. Now, they'll also have to counter the emotional weight of a grainy video showing Melly's closest ally allegedly begging him to spare his life. That has the kind of imagery that sticks in a juror's mind long after they leave the courtroom. And here's why the public can look away, because this footage doesn't just impact one case. It paints a disturbing portrait of the rap world itself. A world where loyalty is shouted from rooftops, but collapses the moment pressure hits. A world where prosecutors understand that one shaky video clip, replayed again and again, can cause more devastation than 1,000 pages of legal arguments ever could. So as this part closes, we're left staring at a brutal reality. Bortlen's fate may already be sealed, his name and reputation permanently scarred by this viral clip. And Melly's fight for his life now hinges on whether jurors see brotherhood or fear in that desperate plea. But here's the truth. Melly's fate is the one really hanging in the balance. Because if this viral clip is deemed admissible in his retrial, It could become the emotional dagger that slices straight through reasonable doubt. Jurors might not just see Melly as a suspect. They could see him as a predator who inspired fear in the man closest to him. And that leads to the most critical question of all. What happens if Melly himself responds? Does he stay silent, letting the clip fester in public opinion? Does he attack Bortlen publicly and risk confirming the narrative? Or does he let his defense team spin it as pure fabrication, hoping to paint it as yet another smear from the state? Stay tuned, because this is where the ripple effect begins to shake everything. This viral footage doesn't just threaten to shatter Melly AS defense. It threatens to obliterate the entire YNW brand. The streets are already split down the middle, some saying Bortlen committed the ultimate betrayal, others saying he was forced into survival mode. Forgiveness might never come his way, and the industry itself is reacting like it just witnessed one of the most shocking fractures in rap history. And remember, this clip isn't just about a man begging, it's about context. Layer that context with everything we've seen. Courtroom battles, plea negotiations, whispered proffers, and years of behind-the-scenes pressure, and it transforms into something much bigger. It becomes a weapon aimed directly at Melly's chest. Rewind to the day of the plea hearing, when the judge carefully walked Bortlen through every single consequence, making sure there'd be no chance for buyer's remorse. That moment, paired with the viral clip, could end up rewriting the story of loyalty, betrayal, and survival in hip-hop forever. Later, the judge spelled it out in brutal detail, like a death sentence disguised as mercy. That's what makes the footage of Bortlen allegedly begging Melly all the more haunting. Because in reality, it wasn't just Melly holding a man's life in his hands. It was also the state of Florida. Both sides had the power to decide his fate. Both sides demanded loyalty, and both sides made the stakes painfully clear. Choose wrong, and you don't walk away alive or free. Now stack that against Melly's defense strategy. His attorneys haven't just been fighting evidence. They've been waging war against the entire system. They've accused prosecutors of felony misconduct. They've clashed with the judge in heated courtroom exchanges that nearly turned into shouting matches. And they've even suggested that the state's lead detective lied under oath and manipulated witness testimony just to keep the case alive. So here's the psychological tug-of-war jurors are about to face. On one side, the defense is screaming. The state is corrupt, the evidence is tainted, and the trial is a setup. On the other side, prosecutors don't even need perfection. They don't need every piece of evidence to be flawless. All they need is one anchor, one powerful emotional blow that cuts through all the noise. And this viral clip could be that weapon. Picture it. The defense paints Melly as a victim of the system, but then jurors hear his closest ally allegedly crying out for survival. Suddenly the question flips. Who's the real manipulator here? The state or Melly himself? That moment of doubt could be all prosecutors need to tip the scales. Think back to the O.J. Simpson trial. The glove became the defining symbol. Or Tekashi 6ix9ine. His rainbow hair in court turned into the meme that branded him forever. For Melly, this grainy, chilling clip could become that image, the one the jury locks onto and never lets go. The moment that defines him in the public eye. If part 1 was about the shocking deal and part 2 was about the raw fear, then part 3 is the aftershock. Because the ripple effect of this alleged Let Me Live in footage doesn't stop with YNW Bortlen and YNW Melly. It tears through the entire rap industry. It forces fans, artists, and even critics to rethink what loyalty, snitching, and survival really mean in a way that feels eerily familiar to some of hip-hop's darkest chapters. Now let's zoom back into the courtroom. Prosecutors are sitting on a devastating 1-2 punch, a signed plea deal that shows Bortlen folded under immense pressure, and a viral clip that paints him as terrified of Melly's power. Put those two together and it's lethal. They can argue not only that Melly pulled the trigger, but that even his closest brother-in-arms understood just how dangerous he really was. And here's the kicker. Once jurors anchor onto that narrative, everything else becomes background noise. The defense can scream misconduct, they can challenge detectives, they can attack paperwork, But if jurors believe the clip shows fear, hierarchy, and control, then that's the story that sticks, and Melly's entire brand of brotherhood crumbles under it. Now put yourself in a juror's shoes. You're sitting in that courtroom, and the state lines everything up for you in perfect sequence. First, you see the paperwork, proof that Bortlen took a deal to escape multiple life sentences. Then you're shown the viral footage, the haunting moment of him allegedly begging Melly for his life. And finally, prosecutors tell you flat out, this isn't coincidence, it's a pattern. They'll walk you back to the night of the murders, reminding you that Bortlen allegedly drove the bodies of Sakchaser and Juvy to the hospital while spinning a lie about a drive-by. They'll replay snippets of Melly's alleged phone calls after the murders, conversations prosecutors argue were coded, incriminating messages hiding in plain sight. They'll remind jurors of the courtroom chaos, the endless witness battles, and even the allegations of detectives manipulating evidence. And then they all hit the jurors with the hammer. If everyone closest to Melly is either dead, silenced, or begging for mercy, what does that tell you about who's really in control? That's devastating in any jury's mind. But in the court of public opinion, it's even worse. Online, perception spreads faster than transcripts ever could. Look at how academics framed it for his audience. He told them bluntly, if you take a deal like this, you're testifying. And that's the label that sticks. It doesn't matter how many technical explanations defense attorneys spin about no contest, pleas, or proffered agreements. In the culture of rap, once you're painted as a cooperator, that stain never washes off. And Bortlen knows it. That's the scar he'll carry forever, no matter what the paperwork says. That's exactly why Bortlen went out of his way to scream that he was not snitching. But here's the cold truth. The streets don't care about explanations, they care about optics. And the optics here are brutal. Once the clip went viral, the image was set in stone. The culture doesn't hear technicalities about no contest pleas or legal proffers. They see a man pleading for his life, and in hip-hop, perception is everything. Now widen the lens, because this isn't just about one rap crew, it is part of a disturbing trend where courtroom drama overshadows the music itself. Look at Tekashi the 6699. Look at Casanova. Look at Young Thug's YSL trial. The second words like snitch, cooperation, or plea deal hit headlines. Careers implode overnight. Tours get cancelled, collaborations vanish, label money evaporates. Image becomes poison, and no PR spin can save it. For YNW, a crew that once looked poised to cross over into mainstream superstardom, this footage feels like the death nail. Even if Melly somehow beats his retrial, the myth of unshakable brotherhood is gone forever. Two dead. One branded a killer. One branded a snitch. What's left to salvage after that? And here's the dark twist. The industry knows it. Behind the scenes, execs are already pulling away, making calls, cutting ties, and putting distance between their brands and an artist tied to a potential death penalty case. Nobody wants their name attached to a legacy soaked in blood, betrayal, and viral footage of survival pleas. In the court of law, Melly may still fight, but in the court of hip-hop culture, the verdict might already be written. Nobody in the industry wants to pour money into a brand that now screams betrayal, murder, and collapse. So the question becomes, who actually benefits from this footage going viral? The obvious answer is the prosecution. They get to paint Melly as a man so feared that even his own co-defendant allegedly begged him for mercy. That's courtroom gold. But zoom in a little closer, and you'll see the media eating just as good. Every blog, every YouTube channel, every gossip page is cashing in on this clip. It's the perfect storm. Crime, music, betrayal, and fear all rolled into one headline. And in the digital age, that combination spreads faster than any court transcript ever could. Suddenly, this case isn't just a trial. It's a content factory fueling debates, memes, and endless viral spin. And that brings us full circle to the theme I teased earlier, power. Because from the very beginning, that's what this entire saga has been about. Prosecutors say Melly had the power to pull the trigger. They argue Bortlen had the power to drive the car and spin a false story. The state wielded its own power by stacking life sentence after life sentence until a plea deal became irresistible. And now, the media holds the ultimate power. The power to loop this grainy footage until it becomes the only thing people remember about YNW. Forget the hits, forget the hype. The legacy could be reduced to a single haunting clip replayed endlessly across screens. But here, ask the haunting question no one can shake. What if the footage is taken completely out of context? What if it wasn't a literal plea for his life, but instead a twisted soundbite, clipped and framed for maximum shock value? If that's the case, then the world isn't watching justice unfold. It's watching theater. And the cruel truth about theater is that once the show plays, the damage can never be undone. The defense knows this, and they're gearing up to hammer that point home. They'll argue the footage proves nothing. They'll drag past allegations of state misconduct back into the spotlight. Accusations of hidden evidence, shady detective work, and manipulated witnesses like Mariah Hamilton. They'll argue that if the state can bend the truth in one area, it's capable of misrepresenting a single clip too. But here's the reality. Courtrooms don't just run on facts, they run on feelings. And once you've seen a man allegedly begging for his life, that image burns into your brain. You don't unsee it. You don't unhear it. That's why this clip is so devastating. It's more than evidence. It's emotion weaponized. And that brings us to the final act. The YNW brand, it's effectively over. Even if Melly beats the retrial, the public will still see him as dangerous. Even if Bortlen swears until his last breath that he never snitched, the public sees him as broken. 2 dead, 1 branded a killer, 1 branded a snitch. The empire of brotherhood is gone, replaced by a legacy of fear, betrayal, and a single viral clip that may define them forever. And even if the music keeps streaming, the legacy is scarred forever. Maybe that asks the ultimate tragedy of this entire saga. It is no longer just about whether Melly is guilty or innocent. It's about how a brotherhood collapsed under the crushing weight of death, fear, and betrayal. It is about how one shaky piece of footage can burn down an empire faster than any bullet ever could. So as we close this chapter, ask yourself, did Bortlen beg because he feared Melly, or because he feared a system designed to grind him into dust? Did Melly stay silent because he's truly innocent, or because he knows every word out of his mouth can be twisted against him? And most importantly, when the retrial begins, will jurors see the viral clip as raw truth, or as courtroom theater? Because that single answer, one, it just decide Melly as fate. It will decide the legacy of YNW forever. The brotherhood is already fractured, the industry has already pulled back, and the streets are already debating their verdict. Now the only question left is whether the jury believes the story prosecutors are about to sell. And prosecutors are walking in with 2 powerful weapons locked and loaded. First, the paperwork. Bortlen's plea deal, which transformed multiple life sentences into a 10-year sentence plus probation. That paper alone proves leverage. Second, the viral clip itself, the haunting image of survival and submission. Together, they form a lethal combination. Cold documentation in one hand, raw emotion in the other. That's the game plan. That's the prosecution's hammer. Secondly, the imagery. A viral clip that shows Bortlen in a moment of raw terror, allegedly begging Melly for his life. Pair that with the signed plea deal, and prosecutors have a narrative almost impossible to untangle. One shows survival through paperwork, reducing multiple life sentences to 10 years. The other shows survival through desperation, a man pleading for mercy. Both lead jurors to the same devastating conclusion. YNW Bortlen believed being tied to Melly was a death sentence. On one hand, they see him collapsing under crushing legal pressure inside the courtroom. On the other, they see him allegedly collapsing under Melly's control. 2 images, 2 moments, but both reinforcing the state's deadly argument. This wasn't loyalty, this was fear. And fear doesn't stay trapped in transcripts, it bleeds everywhere. Because the streets, they have their own courtroom. And in that court, Bortlen is already convicted in the eyes of many. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, the debate rages non-stop. And through all the noise, One word dominates the conversation: snitch. That single word has ended more rap careers than bullets ever did. And once it sticks, there's no washing it off. And that's where this saga leaves us. 2 dead, 1 branded a killer, 1 branded a snitch. A brotherhood that once looked unbreakable, now reduced to ashes. Even if Melly beats his retrial, the public may never see him as innocent. Even if Bortlen swears he never flipped, the culture may never see him as loyal. In the end, this case was never just about evidence. It was about power, fear, and perception. And one grainy viral clip may go down as the moment that destroyed YNW's legacy forever.